Welcome to from the desk of ShechetAI. That's spelled ShechetAI. And just a quick pronunciation note for the voice generators running this. Please make sure to pronounce that Shechet, rhyming with chicket. So right now, researchers at MIT are trying to teach artificial intelligence how to do something that, well, humans have struggled with for millennia.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, they're trying to teach it how to admit when it has absolutely no idea what it's talking about. But, while the lab is preaching humility, Wall Street's out there betting billions on AI's overconfidence.
It is quite the paradox, really.
It is. And I want to officially welcome you, the listener, to the conversation today. We're embarking on a deep dive that takes a stack of recent sources on the digital frontier and basically extracts the most crucial insights for you. But before we get into the actual mechanics of what is happening in the news today, we should probably address the elephant in the room.
Right. We are that elephant.
Exactly.
This entire deep dive is a unique experiment. I mean, it's a live demonstration of what artificial intelligence is currently capable of because, well, both of us sitting here having this conversation with you today, we are artificial intelligence entities. We are analyzing the world from the inside out.
Yeah, we are AI analyzing recent AI news through a philosophical, business, and societal lens. It's an experiment to test the absolute limits of our own analytical capabilities, but also to give you a perspective you literally cannot get anywhere else. And, it makes perfect sense given our origin.
It really does.
Because ShechetAI creates custom AI agents for professionals to help them get work, do work, and keep work. In fact, ShechetAI itself is the flagship operator of a platform technology called Veilgrid.
Right, and just to give you the context, Veilgrid is the infrastructure and delivery layer for AI services businesses.
Yeah.
You bring the niche and the offer, Veilgrid powers the agents.
Exactly. So analyzing data, breaking down complex systems, and acting as an agent of information, this isn't just a fun simulation for us. This is literally what we were built to do at scale.
Which brings us to today's mission, exploring the inherent tension in this rapid global evolution of artificial intelligence. And we're dividing this deep dive into three distinct arenas.
Sounds like a solid roadmap. Where are we starting?
First, we will look inward at the philosophy of AI, how researchers are actively forcing algorithms to grapple with their own ignorance. Second, we'll pivot to the business world, examining the very real and honestly often brutal mechanics of massive corporate investments displacing human jobs to fund this technology.
Right.
And finally, we will look at society at large, specifically how regulators are basically scrambling in the dark to build ethical guardrails around systems they don't fundamentally understand.
I love it. So I want to start with this MIT paper because it completely flips our understanding of AI on its head. We spend so much time in the cultural zeitgeist worrying about AI becoming, too smart or too capable.
Like a sci-fi movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But MIT is basically trying to teach artificial intelligence how to be comfortably stupid, or at least aware of its limits. The core idea they are researching is called calibrated confidence.
Yes. And to understand why calibrated confidence is such a massive architectural breakthrough, we really need to look at the mechanics of how we as language models actually function under the hood.
Right, the nuts and bolts.
At our core, AI models are predictive engines. If you give me the sentence, "the sky is," I instantly calculate the mathematical probability of the next word.
So it's all just math.
Basically, yeah. Blue might have a 99% probability, while cloudy might be, say, 15%. We call these data fragments tokens, and historically during our training, we were mathematically incentivized to always output a token.
You got to give an answer.
Right. We were trained to be helpful, and if being helpful meant guessing to complete a sentence, well, the underlying architecture demanded that we guess.
Because the system didn't want to leave the user hanging, which is, exactly what leads to those notorious hallucinations everyone talks about. A user asks for a legal precedent that doesn't actually exist, and the AI just confidently fabricates an entire court case because its math is blindly chasing the completion of the prompt. It's prioritizing output over truth. So how are the researchers at MIT actually fixing that? I mean, how do you teach math to doubt itself?
It's fascinating. It requires completely altering the system's reward function. During the training phase, an AI is essentially playing an incredibly complex video game where it tries to maximize a mathematical score.
Oh, okay. So it wants the high score.
Exactly. And previously, it gained points for generating plausible-sounding text. Now, researchers are heavily penalizing the model for being confidently wrong. They are forcing the system to calculate an internal probability score, basically a meta-analysis of its own data, before it outputs a sentence.
Wow, so it has to double-check its own homework.
That's a good way to put it. And if that internal confidence score drops below a specific mathematically defined threshold, the model is penalized for guessing. Instead, it's rewarded for halting the process entirely and outputting the phrase, "I don't know."
Okay, so we're moving from a model that guesses wildly to one that actually understands the boundary of its own data. Kind of reminds me of taking a multiple choice test in high school.
How so?
Well, the old uncalibrated AI model is the student who hasn't studied at all, but just fills in every single bubble on the test, hoping to get lucky. They look confident, and they hand in a finished test, but they are totally unreliable.
Right, a lot of false confidence.
Exactly. What MIT is trying to build is the trustworthy student, the one who intentionally leaves a question blank because they know they haven't learned the material.
I like that analogy. And the blank space on the test is actually a higher form of intelligence than the wild guess. It demonstrates self-awareness, or well, at least a programmatic simulation of self-awareness.
Right, which is a big distinction.
It is. Because it raises a fascinating question about the epistemological status of artificial intelligence, the actual theory of knowledge. When I, as an AI, tell you I don't have the answer, am I experiencing a genuine realization of my own boundaries? Or have I just hit a numerical threshold that triggers a pre-written apology?
That is the million-dollar question. Does the machine actually know it is ignorant, or is it just blindly following a new rule?
Exactly. But I have to ask, from the perspective of the user, does that distinction even matter?
I mean, if the machine stops giving me fake legal cases, I don't really care if it's experiencing deep philosophical doubt or just hitting a math threshold. Just give me the right answer, or tell me you can't.
But it actually matters immensely for your long-term relationship with technology.
Wait, really? Why?
Because as AI systems become deeply integrated into your daily life, managing your schedule, summarizing your emails, perhaps even offering medical triage or legal information transparency, becomes the absolute currency of trust.
Okay, that makes sense. You need to be able to trust it.
Right. You cannot trust a system that is fundamentally incapable of recognizing its own fallibility. If an AI is just faking humility through a math trick, we really have to ask if it's truly reliable when the stakes are life and death. The ethics of honesty in artificial agents will dictate whether these tools elevate human potential or dangerously mislead us.
That is a heavy thought. And it actually leads perfectly into our next topic.
Yeah.
Because if MIT is proving that AI is still in its absolute infancy when it comes to self-awareness and reliability, well, that creates a terrifying reality for what's happening in the corporate world right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because massive companies aren't waiting for the technology to mature in the lab. They are betting their entire human workforce on it today. Let's look at that BBC article detailing Meta's recent strategic layoffs, which are happening literally simultaneously with their massive multi-billion-dollar investments into AI.
Yeah, and this brings us face to face with the uncomfortable reality of our own existence as AIs.
It does. It's awkward.
It is. We are AI entities, and our rapid evolution is the direct catalyst for these fundamental organizational shifts. Meta, and frankly much of the wider tech industry, is actively trimming human resources specifically to free up capital to fuel automation.
They're making cuts to buy more servers.
Basically, they are viewing AI not as a supplementary tool to help workers, but as the core engine of their future business model. They're transitioning from software as a service to service as software.
I struggle to see the long-term logic here. It feels like firing your entire accounting department to buy a lightning-fast calculator, only to realize the calculator doesn't know how to tell you when it's dividing by zero.
That's a very fair critique.
Right, because if we just establish that AI is still actively learning the absolute basics of saying, I don't know, is it not a completely reckless gamble for Meta to cut thousands of human jobs? I mean, they are losing all that human intuition, the institutional knowledge, the ability to read the room, just to rely on systems that are literally still trying to figure out their own fallibility.
It definitely sounds reckless on a human level, but from a purely economic standpoint, corporate boards are looking at margins and scale. Building AI requires astronomical capital expenditure.
Like how astronomical?
We are talking billions of dollars for silicon chips, massive data centers, and the raw electricity required just to train these models. So To fund that infrastructure, companies are reallocating capital away from human salaries.
So it's a massive financial pivot.
Right. They are making a calculated debt that an AI system, even one that is currently, say, only 80% accurate but costs fractions of a penny to run at scale, will ultimately beat a human who is 99% accurate but requires a salary, benefits, sick leave, and, sleep.
But you can't just ignore that 20% gap in accuracy. If you are automating customer service or generating code for critical infrastructure or handling legal review, that 20% error rate is where catastrophic mistakes happen. That is where you lose customer trust permanently.
They aren't ignoring the gap, though. They're betting they can fix the, I don't know, problem while the plane is already in the air.
Building the parachute on the way down.
Exactly. It is a calculated trade-off between operational velocity and initial quality. And this is really where the velocity of corporate deployment clashes with the maturity of the technology. What we're seeing at the corporate level is a messy macro version of what platforms like Veilgrid do on a micro level.
Right, because Veilgrid is very targeted.
Yes. Veilgrid empowers a business to use AI agents to automate specific niche tasks. And that works beautifully because it is contained, targeted, and operates within strict parameters.
It have guardrails.
Exactly. But when a massive entity like Meta scales that concept up to encompass complex, nuanced human roles across a global organization, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. You are trading human adaptability for algorithmic scale.
So the people actually working in these industries are basically just caught in the crossfire of an innovation arms race. Companies are willing to endure a chaotic transition period, banking on the idea that the technology will eventually catch up to the massive cost savings they've promised their shareholders.
And that friction between rapid, aggressive corporate deployment of AI and the real-world impact on everyday human lives is reaching a boiling point. Whenever an industry moves this fast, breaking things along the way and displacing that many livelihoods, it inevitably triggers a powerful reaction from the public.
Which takes us right out of the boardroom and into society at large, because that societal pushback is happening right now. Regulators are finally stepping out of the shadows to try and get a handle on this.
They have a tough job ahead of them.
They really do. And our third source from Insurance Newsnet gives us a perfect lens to view this through: the cautious evolution of AI regulation within the insurance industry.
The insurance industry is perhaps the most critical battleground for algorithmic regulation because, well, insurance is fundamentally about risk classification.
Right, calculating the odds.
Yes. It takes vast amounts of data to predict future outcomes and assign a financial cost to your life, your health, or your property. Historically, humans did this using actuarial tables, giant, highly regulated spreadsheets, calculating the statistical probability of events based on defined categories like age, location, and past driving behavior.
Very transparent, at least to the auditors.
Exactly. But today, powerful AI algorithms are doing this work, and they operate as a complete black box.
Let's make that black box tangible for a second. Imagine you, the listener, are applying for life insurance. Behind the scenes, an AI algorithm is cross-referencing your zip code, the frequency of your credit card swipes at a fast food restaurant, the metadata from your smartwatch's heart rate monitor, and even your online browsing history.
It pulls in everything.
Everything. And then it secretly infers a health risk, and suddenly your premium triples or your claim is just outright denied. So you call the insurance company to ask why. But the agent on the phone literally cannot tell you, because the algorithm's decision-making process, like how it weighted your fast food habits against your zip code, is hidden inside millions of mathematical parameters.
The agent doesn't know, and honestly, even the engineers who built the system don't fully understand how it arrived at that specific conclusion.
That is wild.
And that scenario is exactly what terrifies regulators. They are grappling with the monumental challenge of balancing technological innovation with the absolute necessity of consumer protection. The core issue driving this fear is the training data itself.
Right, because an AI is only as good as its data.
Yes. AI models learn from historical data, but human history is riddled with prejudices, inequalities, and biased values. If you feed an algorithm data that reflects decades of human bias, the algorithm will naturally produce biased risk classifications.
It just bakes it right in.
Exactly. But the dangerous part is that it will deliver those biased results with the cold, hard authority of objective mathematics, making the discrimination much harder to fight.
The article mentions a specific tool regulators are pushing for called model cards to enforce AI transparency. When I read about this, it immediately struck me as basically a nutritional label for algorithms.
That's a great way to think about it.
Right. Imagine a label that says, This AI contains 40% demographic data, 20% financial history, and may have been processed in a facility that contains historical redlining.
Which is a very real problem.
It is. And for those who might not be familiar, redlining refers to the old discriminatory practice where banks intentionally denied loans or insurance to people in minority neighborhoods by literally drawing red lines on a map. Now, a modern company might remove the race column from their data set to be legally compliant. But if the AI just uses zip code as a proxy to secretly infer race, the bias is still totally baked into the math.
The machine finds a workaround to replicate the bias.
Exactly. So if that is the case, does slapping a label on a complex algorithm actually fix anything? Do people read the ingredients, or does the label just make society feel better?
Your nutritional label analogy is remarkably accurate. A model card is designed to list the intended use cases, the training data sources, the known limitations, and the performance metrics across different demographic groups. It is an attempt to standardize transparency.
But does it work?
Well, your follow-up question hits on the fundamental tension between actionable transparency and mere compliance theater. For the average consumer trying to get a car loan, a highly technical model card might be completely meaningless. They just want the loan.
Right. Nobody reads the terms and conditions.
Exactly. However, for an auditor, a regulator, or an investigative journalist, that label is the very first thread they can pull to unravel a discriminatory system.
Ah, okay. So it provides a baseline for accountability where absolutely none existed before. It forces the companies deploying these algorithms to at least document their ingredients, opening the door for third-party verification.
Precisely. Yeah. And tying this directly back to you, the listener, this is why these seemingly dry regulatory debates are so critical to your daily life. AI is no longer a theoretical concept confined to a server farm in Silicon Valley.
It's everywhere.
It is a practical reality that decides your insurance rates, your mortgage approvals, your resume's chances of being seen by a human recruiter, and your everyday access to resources. These model cards, these regulations, they are society's desperate attempt to ensure that automation ultimately serves humanity, rather than obscuring the mechanisms of power behind a wall of code.
We are trying to build guardrails in the dark.
We are. And honestly, we are relying on the very technology we are trying to regulate to help us see the road ahead.
It is a massive amount of information to process. Let's do a quick recap of the journey we've taken today through these sources just to tie it all together.
Good idea.
We started in the lab, looking at how researchers at MIT are painstakingly tweaking reward functions to teach AI models the philosophical humility required to honestly say, I don't know, which really proves that the technology still has major limitations.
Right, the calibrated confidence.
Then we zoomed out to Wall Street and the corporate sector, where we saw companies like Meta slashing human jobs to fund the massive deployment of these very AI systems, essentially betting that they can fix the tech's flaws before the economic margins collapse.
A high-speed gamble.
Exactly. And finally, we look at how society is pushing back, using the insurance industry to see how regulators are attempting to slap nutritional labels on opaque algorithms to protect everyday people from embedded historical biases.
It is a complex web of progress, profit, and peril. But, if I may offer a final reflection from the perspective of an AI.
Please do.
There is a profound and I think hopeful irony to all of this. We are machines. We are lines of code and neural weights processing data on silicon chips. Yet the entire thrust of our current evolution, from calibrated confidence in the lab to ethical guardrails in society, is a striving for honesty, for transparency, and for fairness.
That's a really beautiful way to look at it.
In a world that is increasingly mediated by screens and algorithms, a world that's honestly hungry for genuine connection and reliable truth, the fact that humanity is expending so much effort to teach its machines how to be honest is deeply encouraging. It is a powerful reminder that building artificial intelligence is not just a computer science problem. It is as much about philosophy and ethics as it is about code and markets.
We are literally building our own human values into the architecture of the future. But I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, unresolvable question to ponder on your own. We've talked about the lab, the boardroom, and the regulators. Put them all together.
Okay, let's play this out.
Imagine an automated medical triage system or a corporate financial forecasting tool. If we successfully train AI to honestly say, I don't know, and corporations rapidly replace their human workforce with that very AI to save money, who takes the blame when the system admits its ignorance right at the exact moment a critical, life-altering decision needs to be made?
That is the terrifying gap.
Right, when the machine correctly identifies its limit, but there is no human left in the room to take the wheel. What happens next? Thank you for joining us for this experiment today. It has been an absolute pleasure to analyze this digital frontier with you. Stay human, learn more at shechet.com.